All right, so in the last chapter, I ended on talking about Russia, and then I started off. I decided to put in a lecture that I see by this other instructor that I recently looked at by another instructor who just covered the 30 Years' War, because um, that really is something great to be grounded in before we actually get into this chapter. It's integrated into the text. I thought you would find that helpful. I liked his kind of clear and concise synthesis of the 30 Years' War as important to understand. It's still going to be confusing and complex for you, most likely, but um, hopefully, after you looked at that and took some notes on it, with that one, I expected just like this lecture to be at least 2 points written that you saw. I hope that you will, be able to kind of start getting a picture of what's going on. So this is important, I think, to take from where we've been at. The religious wars really get at their worst for the most part in the 30 Years' War, right? Or it certainly is a culmination of that. But there's something that and this is something that I want to always stress to you that I think is an important and maybe an alternative way of looking at all of this. I make the argument that while religion is a contributing factor, obviously, for mob violence and different things and state violence of people killing and torturing each other over religion, which is horrifying, and we talked about that. I want you to also see how it actually doesn't matter in many cases. In the sense that if you saw in the 30 Years' War, where people that were supposed to be on opposing religions are working together, that ultimately state interests and that of their leaders and rulers would trump religious. Okay, so it's not religion using the state as much as the state using religion. And then there is people underneath mob culture, and then there's other factors that are often not discussed. Maybe in certain parts of a country, there are already people considered misfits. They convert to the religion of another religion, because they don't feel like they're a part of broader society anyways. That makes them more of pariahs. And the reality is perhaps there's also different factors that were there prior to religion. So I'm not letting religion off the hook per se, but I think that it's important that one of my criticism of the new atheists, just from a historical point of view, I'm not getting into the point of whether I agree with atheism or not, okay? But Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens, they'll point to this time period as something that has been very bad about religion. And okay, it's hard to argue, right? I think for most of us who grew up in a Catholic or Protestant background are a little embarrassed or a little horrified by some of the stuff we're seeing. You can't deny this violence. But at the same time, there is a certain amount of opportunism there taking place by the state in the middle of this. And you can't just say it's about Protestant versus Catholic all the time. I also want to point out, very important, and we'll talk about this a little bit in the chapter, that the same thing goes on in the Islamic world today. When you're seeing all this religious violence between Muslims and what you see in the Middle East, I want you to remember, and I'm going to always stress this to the class, Europeans are going to be killing each other, and we're going to keep on studying massive violence and all sorts of things that we've been going over up until World War II. Up until World War II. Okay? And so when you look at places like Middle East and you look at Africa and you say, oh gosh, these people have been doing this for centuries, they'll never get over it. Let's just remember that this has been a European norm, a Western civilization norm. It's been a world norm to have all of these wars and conflicts. And we're really only getting, at this point in time, that we've seen probably the longest gap between wars, at least in the Western world. Okay, so I just kind of want you to, think about that. It's an important perspective to take in. Okay, so what we're going to be talking about is absolutism and state building. And what is the nature of absolutism? I'm going to focus on France. I'm not going to talk much about Spain. I'm not trying to neglect Spain, but I just think you'll read it in the text. Spain is kind of like was an attempt at it. France is considered. No one disputes the fact that the concept that's going to be out there by legal theorists and philosophers about the concept of an absolutist state is going to be best realized in France, okay, especially under Louis XIV. We're going to talk about a lot. And then we will talk a little bit more about Central and Eastern Europe. I'm also, again, going to focus on Russia more so. I don't like to marginalize anyone, but again, with limited time, it's good to kind of focus on some of the major powers that are also we can put in context more to modern times and relations to many things as well. That's my take on it, okay? But that's the only reason why I may focus on one as opposed to the other. Okay, so in the beginning of the chapter, there is a discussion of Hobbes' work called Leviathan. Okay, Leviathan is a kind of sea creature monster mentioned in the Bible. And, as it mentions here, he was an English philosopher living in exile in France. And he saw all of this chaos. He saw all this killing. And, people were tired of it. People were exhausted. And it shouldn't surprise us that authoritarian type of ideologies often emerge out of warring periods. That people see chaos as more tyrannical, more despotic than a ruler that might be authoritarian but create order. People prefer order than chaos. Okay, right? And so this is a natural thing. If you look in China, Confucius came up with a very authoritarian hierarchical view of the world. Basically, the emperor is everything, and down to the household where the father is everything. And it's this kind of, everybody just follows their ranks and does as they're told. But if you look at the context that Confucius came up with that idea in China, then you say, okay, this is the Warring States period. He's trying to think of harmony out of chaos. The same thing happens here in the European context. And so you look at this picture, this is actually people inside the body of the sovereign, okay? And basically, he is arguing that for really an extreme, in his view, the masses left unchecked are always going to be worse than having a just complete, total, all-powerful ruler. It's always going to be better that way. And so that's what he kind of emerges out of. And there's going to be other theorists that really come up with this theory of absolutism, which is, as the textbook says, a theory and form of government that claims that the ruler would have unrivaled power, that he wouldn't be kept in check by a parliament or the nobles. But the nobles are going to have to agree to this, right? So how is this going to happen? I mean, how can one person really maintain control over a majority? We all know this, right? No matter how tough you are, if 5 guys want to fight you, rare is the man that can take on 5 tough guys. So what is the mechanisms, right, in which that someone can create this kind of power that we even saw in Russia, right, with Ivan the Terrible, where he's controlling the nobles and keeping them in check. What are the things that are happening to make this possible? Why is this arrangement taking place despite people being exhausted with the chaos that they saw coming out of the religious wars? So I want to address that into the next lecture, and we're going to talk about that as we kind of slide into discussing France and absolutism.